Today at the National Press Club, Olympian and melanoma survivor Cate Campbell and the medical directors of Melanoma Institute Australia, Professors Georgia Long and Richard Scolyer, all three calling for urgent action to save lives with today's National Press Club address.
Good afternoon and welcome to the National Press Club of Australia here in Canberra for today's Westpac address. My name is Tim Shaw. I'm a director and board member of the club, and we welcome you to our broadcast today. Urgent action is required to tackle melanoma, which claims more Australian lives than the national road toll. Olympian and melanoma survivor Cate Campbell, OAM, and Melanoma Institute of Australia's Professors Georgina Long and AO and Richard Scolyer AO, co-medical directors, will share with us today to alert us to the issues surrounding the melanoma crisis impacting Australians from all walks of life and the urgent action required to save those lives. You can follow today's Westpac address at Press Club AUST or hashtag NPC. Will you please warmly welcome Cate Campbell, OAM.
Thank you very much for having me. I would first like to acknowledge the traditional owners on the land on which we meet and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Now, when I was 9 and my family and I were immigrating to Australia from the small African country Malawi, I had many misconstrued ideas about my new home. For instance, I believed that Brisbane was a coastal city with sweeping golden beaches strewn with healthily bronzed bodies, that Australian kids had kangaroos as pets, and that everything in Australia can kill you. You just can't see it coming. When we arrived, I learned the reality. Brisbane is not a coastal city with golden beaches. That is the Gold Coast. Brisbane has mangrove swamps full of spiky roots and mud flats. Sadly, kids in Australia don't have kangaroos as pets, nor do the kangaroos make weird clicking sounds and help everyone solve crimes. One stereotype that did hold true, however, is that there are so many near invisible things lurking in Australia that can kill you. From tiny spiders to perfectly camouflaged snakes to jellyfish the size of your thumbnail, there quite literally could be danger lurking under any chair, in the grass, or in the shallows at our beaches. However, what I didn't know then, but learned many, many years later, is that Australia harbours an invisible menace, something that is more deadly than all the snakes, spiders, and jellyfish combined. Something hidden in that beach-bronzed Aussie stereotype. Its name is melanoma, and it has the unenviable title of our national cancer. It was September of 2018 when I had my first encounter with melanoma. I had just completed one of my most successful years in the pool, was on a break, and was catching up with a friend for brunch. Between mouthfuls of avocado and tasty morsels of gossip, I noticed a large scar running down his forearm. "What happened?" I asked, fully expecting the flippant, "Oh, well, you should see the other guy," remark. Instead, his animated face fell into a serious mask. "I had an aggressive melanoma removed," he said quietly, all the gaiety of the last half hour forgotten. "It was lucky they caught it so early. If I'd left it, even for a few months, I could have lost an arm." I felt the colour drain from my face and my stomach drop. When was the last time I had had a skin check? I couldn't remember. And if you can't remember, it's been too long. I made an appointment that same day. My dermatologist, Dr. Erin McMiniman, is a softly spoken, impeccable woman who radiates calm and reassurance. After examining me, she pointed to a mole on my upper outer right arm, explaining that despite my assurances I'd had the mole my whole life and hadn't noticed any changes, she wanted to take a biopsy, just to be safe. She would call in the next few days with the results. It was a grey and rainy afternoon and I, of course, was running late for my university tutorial. Flustered, I was trying to pay for parking when my phone rang. It was Dr. McMiniman. "I have good news and bad news," she said. The bad news is the mole has come back, and it's come back as a melanoma. Melanoma. I felt the air leave my lungs. It was as if someone had flicked a switch in my brain and time began to stretch and warp. My ears began to ring and my heart started to pound. Melanoma. Even I, with my limited knowledge of the medical world, knows what melanoma means. Cancer. My mind began to spin out of control and I immediately thought of all the things I was about to lose. My hair, my job, my health, my livelihood, my arm. What would happen if I lost my arm? Can I make it back as a Paralympic swimmer? But before I could begin planning that comeback as a Paralympian, thankfully, seeming from a long way away, Dr. McMiniman's voice gently pulled me back to the present. The good news, she said, is we've caught it early. It's stage 1. We just need you to come back in so we can take a wider margin of tissue from around the mole to make sure that we have all the cancer cells. I was booked in for surgery the next day and had all the cancerous cells removed. And for me, that was it. A quiet, simple, feather-light brush with cancer. Since joining the Melanoma Institute of Australia, I have now begun to understand just how lucky I was. I have now met parents who have lost children, people who have lost their partners, young children who have lost their parents, and whole communities whose lives have been torn apart. In the same way that cancer cells invade and monopolize healthy cells in the body, the devastation cancer leaves in its wake has a way of spreading its deadly, fetid tendrils throughout all the healthy, joyful parts of society. Prevention is key. Increasing education and public awareness on the importance of sun safety is paramount. Just one burn in childhood is enough to put you at high risk of melanoma as an adult. Did you know that? Because I didn't. After prevention, the next best thing is early detection. Melanoma is one of the most treatable cancers if caught early enough. If caught too late, it's one of the most deadly. Knowing your own skin and checking the skin of others is key to early detection and treatment. I shudder to think what would have happened if I hadn't caught up with that friend for brunch all those years ago. Lastly, we need funding for research and treatment. More Australians lose their lives to melanoma than die on our roads each year. If nothing is done by 2030, another 14,000 Australians will succumb to this disease at a cost of $8.7 billion. But the actual cost, the human cost, is so much worse. We simply cannot afford to lose that many parents, partners, friends, children, sisters, brothers, maybe potential Commonwealth Games gold medalists. Like our latest Commonwealth Games champion, 19-year-old Sam Short, who had a melanoma removed just 5 weeks before going on to take gold in the 1,500 metres freestyle. Thankfully, like Sam, I stand before you with nothing but a scar running down my arm, the only visible sign of my encounter with cancer. But there are many people in this room and thousands more across Australia who are not lucky to carry a visible scar from their encounter with melanoma. They carry the invisible, yet far more traumatic scars, the absence of lost ones, the destruction of futures, the permanent degradation of their health or the health of people they love. We need to make these invisible scars visible. We need to make the invisible dangers lurking not under our chairs and at our beaches, but in our everyday lives visible and real. It's time. We need to change the way we think, talk, and act around sun safety. It's time to make the invisible visible.
Can we please welcome the co-medical directors from the Melanoma Institute of Australia, Professor Georgina Long, AO, and Professor Richard Scolyer, AO.
Thank you, Tim, and thank you, Kate, for sharing your personal insights. We'd firstly like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we gather today, the Ngunnawal people and their elders past and present, and acknowledge the deep, continuing connection of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders peoples to the land, waters and sky.
It is a real honour to be here in Australia's capital and to shine a long overdue spotlight on a cancer that is so prevalent it is known as Australia's national cancer. And it is tearing families apart. Our address will highlight how we can change that, starting today.
We will outline 2 simple asks of the federal government, and we will also be making a plea to all organisations and individuals who play a pivotal role in shaping public opinion and behaviours around sun safety, sunburn and tanning.
But firstly, we'd like to tell you a little bit about melanoma. Melanoma is the most deadly form of skin cancer. By the time we finish speaking today, 2 Australians will be told that they have melanoma for the first time. Between now and tonight's news bulletin, an Australian family will lose a loved one to melanoma.
Children are losing parents, and parents are losing children, often in the prime of their lives. Let's be crystal clear about the prevalence and impact of melanoma in this country. 1 Australian is diagnosed with melanoma every 30 minutes, and 1 Australian dies from this disease every 6 hours. More Australians lose their lives to melanoma than on our roads each year.
And contrary to popular belief, melanoma is not a disease reserved for older Australians who have spent decades in this sunburnt country. Sure, whilst melanoma is common in older Australians, a little known fact is that it is the most common cancer that impacts young Australians aged 20 to 39.
In this context, this is one of the rare occasions where Kate is just like everyone else. They're Kates in their 20s being treated for melanoma in every state and territory across the country. And tragically, many are dying, like Emma, aged 25, and Amy, aged 23, whose parents are here today. Australia, along with New Zealand, has the highest incidence of melanoma anywhere in the world. This is a gold medal that no Aussie wants or needs. As co-medical directors of Melanoma Institute Australia, a not-for-profit institute affiliated with the University of Sydney, we're at the coalface of melanoma research, education and treatment. We see the human toll of melanoma every day.
Many of my patients have what we call advanced melanoma. That is where the melanoma has spread to distant organs like the lung, the liver, the brain, the bone, and our conversations are very tough. There is often no certainty in outcome. Less than a decade ago, advanced melanoma was an almost certain death sentence. Patients with advanced melanoma would survive several months, if that. Then came targeted therapies, followed closely behind with immunotherapy. And immunotherapy is known as the penicillin moment in cancer treatment. And now, 50% of advanced melanoma patients are surviving well and thriving. They're essentially cured because of these new treatments. But what about the other 50% who do not respond to any of these new treatments? Which camp will the next person that I see initially diagnosed with advanced melanoma, what camp will they fall into?
However, there is light at the end of the tunnel. Melanoma Institute Australia is at the forefront of global research and treatment breakthroughs, and of that we're extremely proud. We're working to personalise immunotherapy to match a patient's tumour biology with specific treatments which are more likely to work for them. And this personalised medicine looks set to transform the treatment of other cancers too.
And in the future, in the next decade, we are confident that our research will lead us to our goal of 0 deaths from melanoma.
But whilst Australia is leading the world in melanoma research and treatments, that's where the plaudits stop. As we all know, prevention is better than cure. It's Public Health 101.
And melanoma is largely preventable. It's preventable by leading a sun-safe life. As a society, we have collectively dropped the ball in terms of preventing Australians from developing melanoma.
Earlier this year, we released a landmark State of the Nation in Melanoma report. It estimated that unless critical action is taken today, that by 2030, 205,000 Australians will be diagnosed with melanoma, more than 14,000 Australians will lose their lives to this disease, there'll be more than 350,000 Australians living with melanoma, and it will cost the Australian community $8.7 billion.
These figures are highly disturbing. If the predicted death toll alone is not a catalyst for change, then surely this huge economic burden is. Importantly, what the State of the Nation report also provides us with is a roadmap to significantly reduce this burden. For the first time, Australia has a clear plan, a blueprint for ridding ourselves of the unenviable title, Melanoma Capital of the World.
State of the Nation details 25 separate recommendations for tackling the melanoma problem. And the onus is now on us collectively to implement these. During the federal election campaign, the then opposition, now government, committed $14.8 million for implementing one of the report's supportive care recommendations, establishing a national network of melanoma nurses. We look forward to working with the Albanese government to develop and launch this melanoma nurse network, and we thank the government for this important commitment.
However, implementing the report's other key recommendations, specifically related to melanoma prevention, will take collaboration, commitment, and courage. But if we do, the positive dividends for the Australian health budget will be significant. State of the Nation calculates that the overall financial burden will reduce by 44%. So let's be courageous. So let's put preventing melanoma on the agenda. This is what we are shining a spotlight on today.
The main risk factor for developing melanoma is UV overexposure. We know that sunburn during childhood, particularly before puberty, substantially increases your risk of developing melanoma as an adult. And commercial sunbeds are now illegal for a reason. They greatly increase your risk of developing melanoma. So live a sun-safe life and reduce your risk of developing melanoma.
And even if, until now, you have not led a sun-safe life, by changing your behaviour from today, you can still lower your risk of developing melanoma, no matter what your age, even if you're 20 or 60.
It sounds too simple, but it's true.
Unless, of course, you live in a country like Australia, where sun exposure is everywhere. It permeates every aspect of our life, our schools, our work, our weekend hobbies, our sports. And unless you're exposed to tanning and sunburn as being normalised, glamorised, even trivialised every time you look at your social feeds or turn on the TV.
At Melanoma Institute Australia, we call this the Kardashian Effect.
And what we mean is this Insta-famous world where influencers set the cultural agenda. A tan is seen as aspirational. It's a sign of beauty, health, and success. And the social feeds of impressionable young Australians are flooded with images of tanned bodies soaking up the sun in exotic locations around the world.
But science tells us otherwise. A tan is actually skin cells in trauma. It's the result of sun-damaged cells producing melanin in an attempt to protect themselves from further UV damage. It's your body's own self-preservation mechanism. A tan is actually your skin sending an SOS.
And from my point of view in clinic, when I'm trying to stop melanoma from progressing to the liver, the lung, the brain, a tan does not signify health and success. All I see is pain, heartache, and suffering. We need to do better. We need to urgently bolster sun safety as a cancer prevention message. We need to give it the public health prevalence it deserves.
State of the Nation highlights improving sun safety as critical in the prevention of melanoma. And while it calls out the need for improvements in secondary schools and in workplace, it's the report's call for improvements in sun safety in sport and modernising the iconic Slip, Slop, Slap awareness campaign where we believe we can all make the biggest impact in terms of melanoma prevention.
We all know how much Australians love their sports. Sports-mad kids pick up their gear every weekend and head to the cricket pitch, the footy field, the surf, the netball court, the tennis court. And have I missed anything else?
And a passionate
softball diamonds.
And a passionate Aussie pastime is donning your team's colours and cheering from the sidelines, often for hours on end. Like most Australians, we love our sport and we love the outdoors. But what is not good for you is overexposure to the sun's UV, which often comes hand in hand with sport.
No one is immune to this. Even our most celebrated athletes and coaches are now living with the aftermath. You've already heard Kate's stories, and Sam's too, gold medalists in the pool, both with cancer diagnoses as young adults.
Dual Rugby League and Rugby Union International, Ray Price and his wife Sandy are also here, both waging their own battles against melanoma. AFL legend Jared Roughhead, whilst unable to join us today, has been vocal in sharing his melanoma journey. And we're delighted his oncologist, Professor Grant MacArthur, is in the audience.
State of the Nation calls for all sporting organisations to increase sun safety protocols and standards. This needs to be for participants, officials and spectators, from grassroots through to professionals.
There is no one-size-fits-all. How sun safety looks is different in different sports. But what is the same is our call for all sporting bodies and associations to start taking sun safety seriously and to start working on it now.
Sun safety needs to have the same billing as other safety measures, which are already mandated through sporting codes. For example, helmets for cycling, softball, cricket, shin pads for soccer, life jackets and high-vis for water sports, and more recently, rules in contact sports have been changed to prevent concussion. All of these safety measures are here to protect athletes from injury now, but also to prevent them from debilitating medical conditions that can even be fatal in the future.
Our call today is that sun safety is afforded the same respect. It's about protecting from sunburn now and preventing developing potentially deadly melanoma in years to come.
And sun-safe strategies across sport can be as simple as swapping out a cap for a broad-brimmed hat, providing long-sleeved UPF 50-plus playing kits, and ensuring sunscreen is applied and reapplied.
Other simple strategies could be used to protect spectators and officials too, like moving games from outside the middle of the day, changing training times to early in the morning or later in the day, providing portable shade structures for the sidelines.
No one sport is being singled out here. This is a sport-wide problem which requires a sport-wide solution. We need to recalibrate our sporting culture from grassroots levels right up to the very top.
The first to answer our call following the recommendation in State of the Nation was the Australian Cricketers Association via CEO Todd Greenberg. Melanoma Institute Australia has already begun discussions with him about how we can work together on improving sun safety measures within the cricket community, including elevating the broad-brimmed floppy white hat to the same status as the baggy green.
We need all sporting codes and peak sporting bodies to take action and ask themselves, what can we do to improve sun safety in our sport? Put it on the agenda for the next board meeting.
We ask the community of sporting parents to raise your voices and ask your local sporting associations, what are we doing about sun safety? And we stand here today asking the same question of Australian sports administrators.
We are calling for the establishment of a sun-safe sport initiative. It will be the key mechanism to elevate sun safety across all Australian sports at all levels, including professionals who are the role models for the next generation.
And for a commitment from the federal government to kick off this initiative. Government can create the appropriate authority that will oversee and manage this sector-wide initiative.
We would love it if in the not-so-distant future, all parents could confidently register their child into a sport or club that has the Sun Safe Sports stamp of approval.
Also critical for the prevention of melanoma is improving community awareness about the importance of living a sun-safe life. The State of the Nation report identifies the urgent need for a modernised national awareness campaign targeting young Australians in particular.
There is a whole generation of young Australians who we fear might have slipped through the sun safety net. Our most successful sun safety campaign, awareness campaign, was the Slip, Slop, Slap. And this was in fact launched last century in 1981, the same year we were introduced to Swatch watches and the Walkman. The campaign ended around 2005 and was briefly reinstated only for the month of December last year.
There's no doubting the impact of the Slip, Slop, Slap campaign on the generation of children and teens who are now middle-aged. But just as Apple Watches and AirPods have been taken over from Swatches and Walkmans, social media has taken over from TV, and influencers have clouded the sun safety message.
Social media feeds are filled with tanned bodies. In fact, deeper the tan, the better. Their collective voices are loud, and we have sat on the sidelines in virtual silence.
Last summer, the government committed $10 million and reran an animated Slip, Slop, Slap campaign. Whilst we were pleased to see a focus on awareness, to be brutally honest, from where we sit, we think the campaign missed the mark. It had not been modernised, wasn't run for long enough, and it was unlikely to have made any lasting connection or changed behaviours within the population that we need to reach.
It is critical we act now and modernise the melanoma prevention campaign and make it relevant to a new generation. To this end, we call the federal government to commit now to a long-term, modernised sun safety prevention campaign to reach children and teens who will be tomorrow's young adults.
When it comes to melanoma and its prevention and change in sun-safe behaviours, we must think in generations, not months or years.
We have one final ask today. It's actually a plea, and this time not of government, but to media, social media influencers and advertisers.
Starting today, we need you to step up and use your influence for good by helping change the national narrative around sunburn and tanning. Casual references to sunburn and tanning are everywhere, normalising behaviour which we know kills. You don't see people smoking or driving without a seatbelt on in television ads, and for good reason. So why do you see people sunburnt? One recent advertisement is a case in point. The Wallabies versus England high tea advertisement featured badly sunburnt English fans. It was applauded by media outlets as tongue-in-cheek.
And at no point, it would seem, during the creation and approval stages, did this ad raise eyebrows about the impacts of trivialising sunburn. Quite simply, we need to do better.
As with sun safety in sports, this is not a one-campaign problem. Our failure to afford sunburn and tanning public health importance in media, advertising and via influencers is a national problem, indeed an international problem.
A sports journalist recently quipped on air that the weather was so balmy they should be out tanning. Imagine the uproar if they had said they were ducking off air for a quick cigarette. A reality TV show last month had a young participant describing how they were so obsessed with their body that they dedicated 5 hours a day to tanning. And then we saw vision of them next to the pool sunbaking.
None of these casual references to tanning or sunburn, and countless others, appeared to ruffle any feathers. The influence of social media also cannot be understated.
Social media platform TikTok, the world's most downloaded app last year, has more than 1 billion monthly users. In Australia, 30% of teens aged 12 to 17 reported using this platform. TikTok's influence is powerful. At last count, a sunburn tan line stream on TikTok had over 200 million views, predominantly teens and young adults, showing short videos of their red, raw burns.
To say that we were disheartened does not come close to describing how we feel at Melanoma Institute Australia when we see examples like this. So please, from today, we ask media, advertisers and social media influencers to view the world through a sun-safe lens. You have massive influence, and we ask that you work with us to change the cultural narrative around sunburn and tanning.
So in summary, whilst Australia is leading the world in developing better tools for accurate diagnosis and developing treatments to save lives from melanoma, in terms of prevention, we can do so much better.
In order to save lives from melanoma, our call today is this. Firstly, federal government commitment to kickstart the Sun Safe Sport initiative.
Secondly, federal government commitment for a long-term, modernised sun safety prevention campaign.
And finally, we plead to the media, social media and influencers and advertisers to change how sunburn and tanning are portrayed.
We would like to conclude by thanking our patients and their families who continue to inspire us every day. The patients we have lost, the families and friends who have lost loved ones, or who are significantly burdened by melanoma, and those currently undergoing treatment with no guarantee of a good outcome.
But it is the Australians not yet diagnosed, but who will walk through our doors at Melanoma Institute Australia in the months and years ahead, who we have focused on today. Their lives will be forever changed by this deadly disease, unless we act now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professors. In fact, I think there are two firsts here at the National Press Club of Australia, a reference to the Kardashians and also having our two professors presenting together. It was nearly a Sonny and Cher moment for many of us. Thank you both so much for that address, and Kate, thank you as well. Can I open the batting on the questions? You are the chair of the Athletes Commission, the Australian Olympic Committee. We've heard from our learned professors today about the importance of media and to look at this from a sporting professional perspective and an amateur perspective. What role do you have and your team on the AOC Athletes Commission in spreading that message? And when the advertising company says you're a gold medalist, Kate, we want you in our cereal commercial and we want you running around in your swim gear, how would you respond to that kind of media influence in the way they want to present their product?
Well, firstly, I would just like to say sun safety is going to be on the agenda for our next meeting, so it's a timely reminder. As chair of the Athletes Commission, it is my great honour to look at all issues that involve athletes, and they can be wide and far-reaching, but I think that health has to be at the #1 priority for athletes because we rely on our bodies to do our jobs. And I think that this is a wonderful spotlight that we've shone on sport, and I think that the improvements that can be made in this area are massive. I'm thinking back to the hours that I spent sitting next to an unshaded swimming pool. I mean, cricket has to come first to mind because they're out there for hours and hours on end, but we have a real opportunity to make real, tangible changes and a real difference. And it starts with changing the narrative, so it starts with changing public perception, but then it comes down to what can we as an organisation, so what can the Australian Olympic Committee or what can the sports governing bodies do to protect their athletes. I believe that they have a duty of care to their athletes, just like employers have a duty of care to their employees. And it doesn't have to be difficult, it doesn't have to be expensive, it can be really, really simple. But we have real opportunities to make an impact on young athletes' lives and the lives of their families. I think that we've really acknowledged that today, is that melanoma doesn't just affect one person, it affects everyone around that person as well.
Professors, the AFL Grand Final is being played this weekend and 100,000 fans at the MCG. The NRL Grand Final is coming up. Billions of dollars in television advertising and endorsement and broadcast rights. What responsibility in terms of fan protection should the codes consider adopting? AFL, NRL, we don't sell underage alcohol at the MCG. What steps should the AFL, for example, take ahead of this weekend's grand final, Richard?
Well, there's simple measures that we can all take to protect ourselves from the sun. So wearing full SPF 50 protective clothing to cover up your skin, wearing a broad-brimmed hat, wearing wraparound sunglasses that not only protect your eyes but also protect the skin around your eyes, to try and avoid games during the middle of the day. I know AFL and some other sports have changed their times in the day, but I'm sure that's not related to sun protection, but it's likely to have had an impact. And lastly, to use SPF 50 sunscreen on any exposed skin. They're the types of measures that protect us from damage that's caused by the sun, and by having that message out there that's shown to fans that this is what you need to do, that will help us as a society. People will get more used to this message and be keener to adopt it. That's what we'd like to see.
Georgina?
Well, today is about kick-starting that conversation and getting this conversation across all sporting sports, actually. Every sport is different. Every sport will have a different problem it has to address. And getting support for that from government will be critical to implement it and to make it happen. But I think it starts with the sport itself, with government help, to talk about what they can do for their players, their athletes, for the officials and for spectators. You're right, you can't have glass as well. You have to have a plastic cup if you're drinking. We have barricades so we don't get the stampede. Sun safety has to be up there with all those other rules or mandates for spectators. It just has to get on the agenda. It's like smoking. What, 40 years ago, it wasn't on the agenda. Look at us now. We'd be horrified if anyone lit up a cigarette. We would be horrified. It has to be that same change in culture and looking at this problem.
Richard?
I think people want to protect themselves and also want to protect each other. And this is something we saw during the pandemic, particularly in Australia. People were happy to make sacrifices for the common good. And if they understand the impact that this may have on them themselves down the future, I'm sure they'll be keen to adopt these practices. But as organisations and sporting leadership teams, that we need to work to provide them, to make that easy for them to follow these rules that we want to put in place.
Let's go to questions from our working press. Anna Henderson.
Anna Henderson from SBS and NITV. Thank you so much for your address today. I wanted to hear from all three of you, if possible, about what the best approach is to actually raising awareness at this point, given it's an increasingly urgent problem and there has been some malaise in public messaging. Is it time for more of a shocking campaign to be rolled out to show what the potential ramifications of having melanoma are? And should things like tanning products potentially have a warning on them in the same way that cigarettes do?
Georgina?
You raise a really good point. So I'll address the first part of it first. Actually, can you just repeat the first part? Because now I'm thinking tanning products and how we need to address that. The first part is what sort of advocate?
Yeah, we see with smoking.
We're not the experts on how to achieve this. But just to give you a sense of it, the advertisement last December 2021, cost $10 million. And frankly, it was pathetic. It was pathetic. I don't think any young adult or teenager even knows it existed. So we need advice from experts in this on how to do this and do it well and get funding, federal funding to support this program that will change and augment as needed, but we need experts to advise us. I don't know if it's a shock tactic like we did with HIV back in the 80s, but if we get the best minds and put the funding behind it, we can come up with a sun safety awareness program that will infiltrate particularly our young people, our adolescents. There are studies that show nothing has changed in the last 4 decades for adolescents and sun safety behaviour.
And I think to add, the other thing that we're calling for is this campaign is not just a one-off. It doesn't go for 1 month. It is a continuous campaign. It becomes part of our culture that we change attitudes around sun safety, tanning, and what people think about. Not glorifying having a tan. That's not the message that we want to see. And we want help from the community to change those attitudes.
And do you think, sorry, Kate, before you answer, do you think that having a warning on tanning oils and things that you can buy in a shop which encourage tanning would have an impact?
Well, we know that sunbeds, for example, they cause melanoma, so they're banned as a commercially.
Can I jump in
Yeah,
quickly
go,
on this? So there's tanning products and there's tanning products. So when we say tanning products, we need to be specific.
Yes.
So we've got the
Not
fake
fake tan.
tanning. Yeah. So you're talking about oils that
Yeah.
promote a tan. Absolutely. It's like cigarettes. Yes, absolutely. That would be extremely helpful if oils that promote tanning have warnings on them that a tan from the sun can cause cancer. Then we've got the fake tanning products, which in our view, we would love to make it a world where everyone loves the skin they're in. Whether you're fair or dark, you just love the skin you're in. Now that's going to take social influence, more than advertising, it's everything together, and that's a huge goal. But in the meantime, fake tan is a harm minimisation. However, when you have a fake tan from a bottle, it doesn't protect you from the sun. You still need to cover up hats, glasses, clothing. So there are several multi-pronged, and we need to break it down with tanning products and attack each one individually. And I mean attack, because this is what we've got to do to actually get the message out there. We really have dropped the ball.
And I think that on getting the message out there, the way that we get the message out there needs to change, and it needs to be very different to that iconic slip, slop, slap campaign. I think I can still sing that jingle because it was just the soundtrack to my childhood. But watching television commercials is not how young people consume media. It's not how they engage with health messages. We have seen the rise, and I know that you guys have spoken about it, of the influencer and how susceptible young people are to social campaigns. We need high-profile people who are aspirational to take this on board and take this message on board and to spread it. You know, someone who a young person looks at and thinks, wow, they're cool, I wish I could be like that. If they're spreading the message, then I think that we have a real chance of getting to the young people. I think also I've heard a lot of people start to talk about like the anti-aging properties of like the sun. Jump on board with that. Like, no one wants to be old these days, you know. And so, like, get the young people on board in that. You need to connect with them in a way that they are going to respond to. And I think that while we need to change the message, it's how we share that message that is going to really have an impact, because it's people who are able to connect with what we're telling them that's going to change behaviours, which is ultimately what we want to see.
And ultimately, we want to see those changes in young people, the young generation coming through, because that's where we'll have the biggest impact as a society.
Yeah, we've got to take every ammunition we've got. The ageing one's a good one, along with the messages. I mean, you can pick an Australian when you go overseas. They literally look a decade or 15 years older than their counterpart in Europe. That's a fact. So there are all these little things that we could do, but I'm not the expert, we're not the experts, but we would hope that we could get some funding, federal support to get behind this and create a message that will evolve and change and react, but get it out there.
Thank you.
Just in terms of advertising standards, there are advertising standards for certain commercials that cannot go to air unless they meet those standards. Should we be incorporating safe standards in terms of representation of elements of the sun? Yes or no?
Yes.
It makes sense to do it, yes.
Kate?
Yes. Have you ever had a short answer with a politician on the couch like that?
Not very often. Our next question comes from Tracy Holmes from the ABC's The Ticket.
Yeah, Tracy Holmes, ABC. Kate, my question is for you. It's great you've already got this subject onto the agenda for the next committee meeting. You're one of the leaders in sport at the moment, and sport is confronted with all sorts of challenges. We've seen another horrendous story in the media today, another AFL racism story. You mentioned previously you came from the small country of Malawi. We know that in Malawi, people who are white are treated very differently to people who are black, and yet we see that in sport here as well. So when you have these challenges that leaders like you need to address, how do you address that? How do you ensure sport guarantees it will make change when it can, because it should?
I think sport has a real opportunity in that it reaches and touches so many people from so many backgrounds. In some ways, it's like this universal language that we can all speak, and therefore I think that we have a responsibility to champion causes, because we might be able to reach someone that doesn't turn on their TV for anything else. There are obviously very, very many issues that need to be addressed, but I would say that those issues are not unique to sport. I think that the issues that arise in sport are the issues that are mirrored in society. And quite often we see sport take the lead in addressing these because we can do it in a smaller scale, and then hopefully that creates change and the ripple effects move outwards. I think there are, how do you make systemic change is a multifaceted question. I really like the idea of people taking personal responsibility and making the most of their opportunity. But then we also need changes that come from our governance, so the national sporting bodies, and then the government as well. One of the wonderful things about sport is that, in general, I do find it a very accepting place for a lot of people. I joined my local swim club as a way of making friends and meeting new people in this country where I didn't know a single person. Yes, I spoke the language, and yes, I looked like most of the people around me, and I recognised my privilege there. But I think that one of the best things that sport gives to society is this sense of community. And just the fact that we are seeing national outrage on this case of racism is a positive step and shows that we're moving in the right direction. And I would call on all national sporting bodies to have a look and really understand the level of influence that they have over society and make changes from there. And then athletes, get on your social media. We're followed by so many thousands of people. So many people look up to us as role models. You have more power than you think you do. And if you see something, do something. If you see something that you don't agree with, do something about it. So I think that there are lots of ways, and it's a very big question, and I'm not sure that I am really qualified to give the full answer to it. But I believe that each and every person has more power than they think they do, and then national sporting bodies have a responsibility to spread that message, because it goes far and wide out into communities.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. Our next question comes from Sam Short, Australian Commonwealth Games champion. Sam, welcome to the National Press Club.
Hey, thank you. My question is, I've been in the sun most of my life. Me and all my mates did surf lifesaving. I've always been the guy carrying around the sunscreen because my parents made me and putting it all over myself. And then I'm the first one. My friends kind of didn't. I was the first one out of all of them to, get melanoma. I was only 18. I want to, no melanoma in my family. Why was me as an Australian young one who has a pretty good sun safety routine get it before, other people when they're young that have none at all?
Georgina?
Yeah, that's a good question, and that's what a lot of my patients say. Why me? I hung around everybody else who behaved the same way. Why did I get it? And it is multifactorial. And you may not have a family history of melanoma, but it is multifactorial, and there is a genetic susceptibility, not a specific one, just the mix of your genes that may make you more susceptible. It's the luck of the draw of the genes you were born with. But what I can say is that starting now and being sun safe, even though you feel you were sun safe from 0 to 18, sunscreen does a certain amount. You've got to reapply it. I'm not saying you didn't, but clothing and shade structures, there are systemic things that are not on your shoulders. They're on all of our shoulders that can improve it for all our young Australians. So increasing the shade structures, putting surf lifesavers, they've now got the nice shade structures. I remember growing up, they didn't have those shade structures. The poor surf lifesavers were out there with that board and the thing to save people without the shade structure. So there's a lot of systemic things that we can do to protect our young people so that we don't have another Sam in another 18 years' time. And there's no test we can do to say why that person got it and that person didn't. But I can tell you, if your friends spent their first 18 years with you, they're still at risk and they need to know the skin they're in. That's what I would say to that.
Richard?
I was going to add the same words as Georgina. That's such an important message for all Australians, to know the skin you're in. If you see a change on your skin, go and seek medical attention, because we know if melanoma is detected early, treated appropriately, most people will be cured. So early detection is a key message. And I guess, as Georgina highlighted, Sam, the other important thing is you've now got a marker that you have a susceptibility to develop skin cancer. So you need to keep a close eye on your skin to detect any new ones that might come up.
Yep.
And spread the word to your friends.
Yeah, I definitely.
Keep an eye. They've got to keep an eye on their own skin.
Yep.
Kate, we remember Kathy Freeman, 400 metres, running in that extraordinary race outfit. To Sam's point, where we see Surf Lifesaving, we see the red and the yellow, are we needing our national surf lifesaving organisations to have a sun-safe, sun-smart message as well on that uniform? Should it extend to that?
Yeah, I think that making people aware of it consistently. I mean, how often do you go to the beach and 4 or 5 hours have passed and you're like, oh my gosh, I've been in the sun all the time. Have I reapplied sunscreen? I mean, you're out there, you're having a good time, but making people consistently aware of it. Why can we not provide sunscreen at all of those surf life-saving flags at the beach? Why are we not sort of normalising getting a shade structure? I mean, we have a wonderful new one called Cool Cabana, which has just come out of Noosa, and I now have one, and I never go to the beach without it, because it means that I can prolong my stay at the beach, because I know that I am able to retreat from the sun and seek shade. And the Slip Slop Slap campaign was really good, but it didn't tell us that that sunscreen alone isn't enough, that we need to seek shade. We need to avoid exposure at those really warm times of the day. I think it's really interesting saying that we've put a lot of sport in the afternoons and the evening for television. Women's sport doesn't fall during prime time. They're still playing in the middle of the day. We need to do more to protect those young female athletes, because they are going out and getting the full brunt of the sunscreen, because they don't have the luxury of being in high demand for those prime time viewing. Because you're right, the prime time viewing wasn't because we were like, oh, let's protect our athletes and spectators. It was like, oh, where can we get the most advertising dollars? And so, there are lots of ways that we can still do better and be better, and look at ways that we can protect young people out in the sun.
Georgia?
Yeah, I was going to say uniforms are another great example. I mean, they're just not good enough. I'm not going to single out any sport, because I can think of an example in every sport where the uniforms need to be better. There's no hats, and I will say the beach, sun life savers, what do we call it? There's a name for it. Nippers. Little hats that don't cover your skin, singlets. I know there are some efforts to change that, but it needs to be mandated. A lot of the kids out there are primary school age. It needs to be mandated. And so that you're not the only one with your sunscreen and your long sleeve shirt. And there can be really fantastic, I mean, Kathy Freeman's outfit is fantastic, sun protection.
And very
and
fast.
made her fast.
So iconic.
And the materials are getting better. So we have to have a cultural shift that this is what the norm is. It is not normal to be in a dining room and have someone light up. It is not normal to be playing your sport in a skimpy, small, singlet, tiny sports outfit, especially for the grassroots and our amateur. I mean, it's just where they are in the middle of the day. It's just not on. It's unacceptable.
Our next question is from Nick Stewart from the Canberra Times.
Thanks very much. A terrific, short, sharp and actionable request, first of all, which was to establish a melanoma institute, I think. How much would that cost? A mere bagatelle for a government swimming in money as the current one is. But what specifically would you like to see? I mean, is this a $10 million institute that really could make a difference? And the second question is, how long do you... it's great to know that Cricket Australia were very quick to get in touch with you. How long will it be before we swap the baggy green for the floppy green? Would that make a difference? Is that symbolic enough? And which were the sports that you had expected to get a call from and you haven't?
Wow. Let's go to Richard on the sports. Who should have called you at the Melanoma Institute of Australia?
There's a lot in that question.
Yes.
Well, we've reached out to many sports at all levels. So softball, I know Softball New South Wales are here today, volleyball, surf lifesaving, swimming, cricket, AFL, AFLW, netball, the whole range of sports. But cricket, the Australian Cricketers Association were the first ones who got in touch with us, and Todd Greenberg has been working with us at MAA and exploring ways that we can improve sun safety across cricket at all levels. And one suggestion has been that elevating the floppy, baggy, floppy white hat to the same level as the baggy green. And just imagine it at a presentation ceremony, the first day of a test match, a new Australian cricketer is not just given his baggy green, but is given a floppy white hat at the same time. The impact that would have on young people, young cricketers, these icons that they look up to, that they'll see that as something that they're happy to wear. So
We can do it tomorrow. Tomorrow. You asked when, let's do it tomorrow. Let's get that floppy white tomorrow. It's not our decision, it'll be Cricket Australia, but that can be a call.
Georgina, how much money for that recurrent funding that you both referenced in your speech, and controversially, should it come from some of the player registration fees? That, yes, insurance is really important for player safety, but should there be some sun safety revenues coming from all player registrations to assist in funding this?
I don't think we're in a position to say how the sport itself will conduct itself. But there were two asks today, just to clarify the two asks. One was a modernised campaign to prevent melanoma. That will pay back the government in spades. $1 spent in prevention will pay back $2 to $4. So on the stock exchange, if you had that sort of guaranteed payback, you'd be mad not to invest. It is crazy. It's a no-brainer. So investing in the prevention part of our ask, the long-term modernised campaign, is a no-brainer. It will pay back in spades. Instead of...
I was just going to pitch in that it costs the Australian community $1.7 billion management of skin cancer each year. So it's a massive amount of money. We can save so much.
So that can pay what you invest now. So that answers that part. The other ask we had was a sun-safe sports initiative. And that's where you talk about registration fees. There are many ways to do it, but it's got to be kickstart centrally, federally, and get all the sports involved, because it isn't a one-size-fits-all, and then look at how that can be done. I think it's very simple, as Kate said it before, in her leadership role. It is very simple to put that on the agenda, and each sport individually has to look at how it's being done, and we have to get federal support. How much it'll cost? All I can say is that it costs $10 million for the awareness campaign in December, and that was not good enough. But as I said, you've got the dollars there. By investing in prevention, you will have the dollars in spades in the next decade.
Just to follow on, Gary Maddox from the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age has sent a question. We know the slip, slop, slap campaign was dropped, but it seemed so successful at the time. Why has the country dropped the ball on this, Richard and Kate?
Well, I don't know the answer to why it's done it, but it's disappointing that it has. Slip, slop, slap campaign, I think it does need to be modernised. We need that how our societies has changed. As Kate so eloquently described, traditional media doesn't have the same influence that it does, particularly in younger people. Social media in particular is where a lot of young people get their messaging from. So we need to modernise our skin cancer prevention, melanoma prevention campaign, so it's targeted to the population we need to get to, and that's particularly young people.
Should we try and sing the song, Kate?
No, please, I did not sign up for that.
But it's ironic, the quick commercials have been running for decades and incredibly successful.
Yeah.
What are you calling on state, territory, federal governments to do?
Everyone, I think that we got complacent. We looked at something that we did well, and instead of saying, let's build on this, let's keep it relevant, let's keep it going, we were like, job well done. And we should never be doing that. We should always be looking to push forward, to modernise, to keep getting better, because we know that this disease never sleeps, it never rests, and it's lying in wait in probably some people in this room right now. It'll come out to light in years to come, or perhaps if you go for a skin screening very soon. So I think that, yeah, we got complacent, and we can't afford to get complacent because our adversary is always there. And we're not saying don't go out and enjoy the sun and do all the things that make being Australia great, because I'm, someone who spends most of my time outdoors, but it's about doing it in a really safe way. Let's get good governance changes from the top down to protect people.
Thank you, Kate. Our last question comes from Maurice Riley, the Chief Executive of the National Press Club.
Thanks, Tim, and thank you, everybody, for being here. I want to pick up on uniforms, dress codes that's been sort of alluded to. I mean, should we have... do you see in the future that, councils will have minimum dress standards, codes on beaches? For example, I think the AFL the Victorians will probably insist on the Swan supporters being on the western side of the MCG on Saturday, right? So, should we have dress codes going into stadiums where we're playing games in the day? I take the point about... I watch a lot of the AFLW, and you're right, it's right in the middle of the day, at the end of the day, because it's not where it is. So is that where we're going to get to?
Kate?
Yeah, I think that it's a really simple, easy, positive step. I think the wonderful thing about this is that we're not asking for really massive changes. They're really, really simple things that can be implemented from the ground up. It's about changing norms, right? I think of all the fuss that happened when we got rid of plastic bags from supermarkets, and within a couple of weeks, everyone remembered their bag, and if they didn't, then they paid 15 cents to get one. Like, it is as simple as that, and people will adapt and will change. We've seen how adaptable we can be over the past 2 years. We're not asking for big changes like that. It's about shifting the goalposts, if we want a sporting analogy, but it's about changing the norms, and it can happen right from grassroots, but it needs to happen from the top down as well.
Georgina?
I was going to say organised sports is the place to encode it, and that will also have the secondary benefit of increasing awareness. And so, you can go down to any beach in Sydney, for example, and it's just everybody's just there with their bare skin showing. But you would hope that if we have a campaign that's long-lasting and you encode it in organised sports, the awareness rises in the community, and hopefully we won't see as much on the beach. But whether we have a barrier like a weapons thing and you can't go through to the beach unless you're all covered up, I don't know we're going to get there. But at least we raise awareness and encode it in organised sports.
So
Finally,
you're not calling for a bikini ban.
No ban on the bikini, Richard?
No, we're not legislating for action like that. But in all seriousness, it's about starting this conversation, raising awareness, and individuals it'll become ingrained. We didn't change attitudes towards smoking or plastic bags overnight. It took time, and it was through education and public awareness, and that's what we need to do with sun safety.
And wearing a UV wristband, which I'm sporting today. If you want to know more, melanoma.org.au. Will you please thank so much our guests today, Professor Georgina Long, AO, Professor Richard Scolyer, AO, and Cate Campbell, OAM. And we have a gift for you. It's a gift of membership here to the National Press Club. It'll even get you in the car park. Thank you again for being here. And don't forget, everyone at home, slip, slop and slap. Thank you very much.